Okay, good afternoon everybody and welcome to the Employability and Skills Forum. My name is Gamu Matarira and I'll be chairing this forum. I am the founder and CEO of Jane Consultancy, which is an Africa-facing business helping international businesses enter into Africa and vice versa, building up the SME pipeline from the African continent to build strategic partnerships with international businesses. I am joined today by a number of experts in the field of green skills and sustainability within the region, and I'll let everybody introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Jane.
Thank you very much, Marie. Good afternoon. My name is Jane Vivian. I'm from Reward Risk Management Limited, and I am a HR specialist. I help companies to determine what they should be doing and rewarding their staff for. So what are the employment perspectives that they've got, everything from salary through to what the career matrix looks like, and have they got the right skills coming through the pipeline, which is a really big issue now.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself, David?
Of course, yeah. So hi, thank you for having me, first of all. So I'm Dave Crew. I'm Head of Business Growth and Employer Partnerships at Western College. And Western College is one of the largest further education college in this region. And we deliver training to around 2,000 businesses. And I'm actively looking at this agenda. Looking forward to the discussion.
Great. We're looking forward to hearing it from your perspective as well. Phil, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, hi. My name is Phil Stott. I'm the Head of Construction and Sustainability at a company called YTKO. We do a number of different government-funded projects, but I'm here today with my construction and sustainability hat on. My background obviously comes through a lot of the government projects that have been related to the built environment and the sustainability aspects of that. And obviously, there's a massive skills crisis in construction, and obviously we're seeing that as being a major focus of the retrofit and the green Build Back Better agenda as well.
Fantastic. Great to have you here. And last but not least, Jane, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Jane Vivian. I'm People and Skills Programme Manager at the West of England Combined Authority. So my role is to oversee a number of key strategic work programmes such as Workforce for the Future, Future Bright, Digital Skills Investment Programme and Community Support. We also work with the other mayoral combined authorities across the UK and government departments looking at green skills and policy that relates to that. And Phil is actually one of our delivery partners for Workforce for the Future, looking specifically at modern methods of construction and how we can encourage people to take up that skill set.
Fantastic. Okay, so to kickstart today's session, Jane Vivian is going to start us off with a presentation about what's going on within the green skills area here locally, regionally. So Jane, I'll hand over to you, and then from there we will have a discussion delving further into some of the key trends that are coming out of your presentation. Take it away, Jane.
Thank you. So I thought I'd start with our recovery plan, which is the plan that was put together as a response to COVID. This complements and sits alongside the employment and skills plan for the West of England. But as you can see there, one of the 5 key strands within the recovery plan is green recovery. So I thought it was really helpful to kind of just show how front and centre green skills, green recovery and building back better is on the agenda. On a similar vein, in terms of the recovery plan and the wider skills ecosystem, we've got a number of projects and programmes that have been funded through the recovery plan that are running, but also wider skills programmes such as I mentioned earlier, Workforce for the Future and our AB provision, Future Bright and Careers Hub that are all focusing on green skills. And I'll come on to that in a little while and give a little bit more detail to that. Sitting alongside the work of People and Skills, which is the part of the directorate that I'm in, we've also got our Growth Hub that's focusing on kind of the employer side of green skills, and we work really closely with them. And they've run a number of support packages such as green business grants, and our innovation team have also been just launched low carbon grants as well. So there's lots going on across the whole of our area of the combined authority. And then wider than that again, obviously there's the transport infrastructure team and the policy and strategy team that are, that work on our net zero aspirations and policies. So I'm sure you're all probably already aware, but we commissioned, because of the importance and the increasing profile that green skills have got on the government's agenda, but also on the business agenda, we commissioned a comprehensive piece of analysis, which has formed a fantastic evidence base. That was undertaken by Acuity, who have also been advising the LGA and other government departments on green skills and retrofit. And they did that piece of work earlier this year. It was launched as part of the Mayor's Skills Summit in July. And again, links to his mayoral priorities around green skills and the green agenda. We undertook, as part of that work, a very strategic piece of consultation. Dave and other colleges were involved in that, along with membership organisations, SMEs, business stakeholders, local authorities. So it really is a very comprehensive piece of evidence that we've now got that identifies not only the, the opportunities for green recovery, but also some of the threats and risks that we need to address as an area. So it's given us a skills stock take, and in the reports you'll see that we've got recommendations to take forward and interventions to take forward. And I just want to point out there that those interventions and recommendations aren't just for the combined authority, but for all of our strategic partners to take forward. So it really does give us a kind of a central point, these reports, to be able to then look at how all of our individual activities are contributing to the issues and the recommendations that these reports highlight. So in terms of the phase 1 report, that links specifically to retrofit and retrofit opportunity. I'm not going to go into detail because we've only got 10 minutes for this presentation. So the reports are on our website, and it's definitely worth having a look if you haven't already. But just to point out that in terms of low carbon jobs, they currently stand at only or less than 1% of the total jobs in the west of England. So clearly there's a massive kind of opportunity there. And by 2023, in order to meet the net zero targets, we're going to need another 50,000 net jobs. And they're both direct, but also indirect. So within the supply chain and within ops and maintenance and other professions as well. I'm sure everyone's really already really au fait with this, but you can see figure 16 from the report looks at the roles around retrofit, and then helpfully the report then also looks at the types of qualifications that are going to be needed, either that are currently available or are not available but need to be provided, and breaking those down into low, medium and high level skills. So that's quite, again, the issue we've got, I think, is people often say, when is the curriculum, when is there going to be, this kind of new qualification to help us? Well, I think the reports identify that although there will be new qualifications that need to be provided to meet the need, a lot of the provision also needs to be woven into existing qualifications. So in terms of phase 2 report, green skills, so we felt it was really important here to take green skills in its widest form. So you'll see in the report that green skills is applied across all different sectors and all different job roles. Just putting that opportunity into its context, there's 500,000 homes in the west of England. 58% of those have got less than a band C. And so, and less than 1% have a A rating. So there's a massive issue there that needs to be addressed over the next few years. 14,000 new green jobs at all skills levels will also be needed across the west of England. And I'll come on to talk now in the next slide. That's obviously the green jobs, but we also know that there's a real opportunity and need to build green elements into existing jobs as well. So there's an upskilling piece that needs to happen there as well. So just taking that comment and sort of expanding on it really, you can see here on the screen, again, this is lifted from the reports, looking at traditional job roles and functions within businesses. So for example, financial analyst, an accountant, we know that these job roles are going to have to adapt to make sure that businesses are greening and meeting some of the low carbon and net zero requirements of government. So you'll see there, for example, with the financial analysis, that will become green financial planning. Accountants we're likely to see new roles or new accountancy roles around carbon accountancy. So it's taking existing qualifications and existing job functions and expanding them. And that's where I think there's a disconnect between current thinking around qualifications, that, you know, often people say, oh, we need this new qualification in X. Well, actually, no, quite often what we're going to need is actually an expansion of existing curriculum to incorporate those elements and ensure that people are ready for those new job roles or expanded job roles. And that's this slide again taken from the second report on green skills, again just illustrates that point that I've just made. So I thought it'd be helpful to maybe take a bit of a stock take and just give you an update on what we've been doing as a combined authority in partnership. This is by no means it's just from a skills perspective, and I just want to make that point actually. This isn't including all the work that's happening in the transport teams, the policy teams, the innovation and sector development teams. This is just purely looking at people and skills. The skills summit that the Mayor pledged and held in the first week of July very much shone a spotlight on green skills. That's a key priority in his mayoral pledges, and it's very high on his agenda. And that was a really good opportunity to shine a spotlight on some of our FE providers and some of our other providers and what they're doing around green skills. So it was, it started to really, I guess, up the ante in terms of looking at what's already been provided and what skills provision is in the area. In terms of the Green Recovery Fund, we've launched that through the Growth Hub, and that's looking at that's the Green Business Grants have been launched through the Growth Hub. The Mayor has also pledged a Green Recovery Fund that hasn't been signed off yet, but it will focus on a wider remit than some of the existing skills programmes. So it will add to the existing provision from the West of England Combined Authority, looking at retrofit, decarbonisation of transport, environmental measures and such. So there will be further details on that to come out once that's been approved through the board. We've also been working in partnership with national organisations such as the Catapult Decarbonisation Academy, and they have consulted with our FE colleges in the area as well. So looking at what's coming from a national level and planning for that, and ensuring that we're kind of aligning to that national thinking around kind of decarbonisation. The Growth Hub, as I've just mentioned before, the Growth Hub launched and has delivered £1.7 million worth of green business grants. Those letters are being issued to businesses, and I think there might be a further round on that. In terms of skills provision, our £9 million Workforce of the Future programme is looking at, or is there to support SMEs in the West of England to basically future-proof their business through workforce development and skills and bringing new skills in. We've got a fantastic range of partners already involved in Workforce of the Future, and we've recently just gone out for a second call, and we've brought in some specific elements around green skills. So you see there the UE Green Skills for Growth and the YTKO Modern Methods of Construction. But actually that's not to say that, and I'll show you on the next slide, that some of the existing delivery partners aren't addressing green skills. It's just that we've complemented to that through that second call. We're also speaking to a number of FE and HE providers around greening their curriculum and doing an audit of where green skills are already implemented within the curriculum and how that could be expanded to address some of those new job functions that we know are coming. We've also got our skills portal, which identifies skills and employment training that's available in the west of England. And what we're doing now to add to that piece of mapping is identifying where any of that provision includes an element of green so that we can identify that on the portal. We're also working with a number of providers who are delivering the boot camps and other skills programs, such as the UE Achieving Net Zero for Buildings boot camp that's launching next month. And at a very grassroots level, we've got our community support fund that is a pre-employment and pre-training kind of community-based grassroots fund that's due to launch, which we've included an element of environmental measures within to really test at the grassroots level how green skills can be developed. So quite quickly, because I'm conscious of time, Workforce of the Future, you can see there that we've got the project team that sits within the West England Combined Authority, the core service support, which are those initial partners that onboarded a year ago, and then the new Call 2 partners. And you can see there that most of the partners have an element of green and green skills within them, which is fantastic. Within that Call 2, we've just onboarded UE, the Clean Skills for Growth, which I mentioned, and that's going to be split into two halves really, developing a skills network and a diagnostic that will help them with planning for Clean Skills for Growth. And then the second part, looking at a toolkit and workshops for leaders, so this can really be driven from the top down, as well as some of those wider workshops for production and other organisations. Phil will be able to cover this in more detail. I've just put it in here to show how Workforce of the Future is having a lot more of a focus, but obviously modern methods of construction for SMEs is critical part of the provision, and we're really excited to have Phil and YTKO on board to complement the offer that's already been provided through the colleges and through some of those other delivery partners. As I've mentioned, Community Support Fund, this is launching next week. There's an event on Monday, a market engagement event, and then we've got some individual workshops. It's about supporting those that have been disproportionately impacted by COVID, and looking at social value measures, including green. And we're really hopeful in it directing and starting to get people thinking about green skills in those community-based projects. And then hopefully we can pick them up and direct them onto employability support, training and development that's available, and start that progression route around green skills. In terms of our careers hub, so they work with all 95 schools and colleges in the west of England. So they've got a fantastic impact across all our education providers in terms of green skills. And they're now looking at how they align that provision with the school activity around the green skills agenda. They're providing LMI into schools so they can understand the types of job roles that we're seeing, and how that is growing as an opportunity for the next generation of students that are coming into the workforce. Future Bright is our £3 million in-work progression programme that's delivered across the west of England. This includes one-on-one support for individuals looking at either advancing within a current career or a current job role, or sometimes looking at a new opportunity. And interestingly, last month we actually had somebody who wanted to move into conservation. So we're starting to see that green, sustainable goals and green skills are coming through in all areas of our provision, not just through some of the skills kind of programs such as Workforce of the Future. And then just to highlight, I've mentioned this throughout really, but in terms of the Growth Hub's work and the work of the sector and innovation teams and the wider work of some of the departments within the Combined Authority, we've got, for example, the Green Business Grants, which I mentioned, the Local Energy Scheme. The South West Energy Hub sits within the Combined Authority and is leading on a number of programmes, and also DETI, which is the Digital Engineering, Technology and Innovation project, is looking and supporting digital skills that help to develop sustainable products and obviously reduce the carbon footprint. So just before I finish, skills portal, which identifies skills, employment, employability, training and support for individuals and career support, has now launched on the new website as an interactive tool across the west of England. We will be doing an audit of this and, as I said, identifying which services and provision includes an element of green skills within it. So that's the next piece of work that will happen. And just to say really that we're working externally with so many different organisations now that, you know, it's, I think there's a real opportunity to drive green skills in terms of our, you know, going back to that very first slide, through, you know, the recovery initiatives that are happening across the west of England. And that's it from me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jane, for that really insightful presentation. Before we move on, I'd like Lauren, if that's okay with you, to introduce yourself. We went around the table introducing the panel members. So before we dive deeper into the conversation, would you like to introduce yourself, Lauren?
Sure, I'm so sorry. I actually ended up being in another area of the building thinking it was there instead of here. So
That's okay.
sorry for my abrupt entrance. My name is Lauren. I'm the Business Community Manager at Future Leap. And we are a sustainable co-working space as well as a network of nearly 300 businesses that are all wanting to become more sustainable.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so I'm just going to broadly set the context. So the UK government wants to turn the UK into the world's #1 centre for green technology and finance, laying the foundations for decades of economic growth by delivering net zero emissions in a way that creates jobs and allows us to carry on living our lives. So to add to this agenda, the UK was the first major economy to embrace a legal obligation to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So getting to net zero means we can still produce some emissions as long as they are offset by processes that reduce greenhouse gases already in the atmosphere. So thinking about that broadly and tying into what Jane was just talking about in terms of some of the things that are happening within the region, we're going to start looking at some of the questions to really unpack what all this means for South Gloucestershire and for businesses in South Gloucestershire. So the first question we're going to look at today, thinking about the green recovery plan for the region of building back better commercial and domestic properties and accelerating this path to net zero, how can businesses start to consider retrofit skills? I will come to you first, Phil.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a sort of, it potentially is like eating an elephant. It's kind of a bite at a time. Sometimes with retrofit, and I've worked with the Green Construction Board and the Construction Leadership Council on the retrofit agenda, and particularly with skills for several years. And we almost always come back to the problem of it needs to be more, it needs to be now. And with the government political approach, it tends to be more around sort of decarbonising the grid and also trying to sort out houses. And I think there's some stuff coming on retrofit in the next few weeks, which should be, again, about supporting the funding and the driving of the policy. Obviously, we saw yesterday the announcement on air source heat pumps. I think the issue with all of this, though, is that you can have all the policy in the world, but unless you build a business case for an SME to invest in the skills that they require, you're creating actually quite a volatile market sometimes where people are relying on government subsidy in order to have made the business case to invest. Back with the feed-in tariffs, the renewable heat incentives, even the Green Deal when it first came out, again, we had a lot of businesses who were thinking, great, this is, you know, like the gold rush. We will go and retrain to become a PV installer, and those PV installers are really reliant on a market which was reliant on subsidy. The moment the subsidy dropped, the market disappeared, and everyone said, well, I've spent, you know, £5,000-10,000, which might not sound like a lot for a business, but you've got to remember that these construction, well, even if you took the whole built environment, it's over 90% sole traders, micro businesses under 10 employees. So if you are saying that you're investing in any sort of skills, you have to make the business case for it. Now, there is a business case for retrofit, there's proper policy in place, and also with retrofit, we're seeing sort of two sides of it. One is basically trying to sort out the low-hanging fruit. Those people who are under EPC level C, we're looking at the minimum energy performance standards there. Now that might be the unsexy stuff, insulation, it might be fabric first, it might be tightening the box, it might be looking at your drafty windows and seeing if you can do something about that. And then there's also the other side of retrofit as well, which is what we would call modular retrofit, which is based on something called the Energiesprong approach, which was a Dutch term which came over here. And that is basically that you can take a whole row of houses of similar types of buildings and retrofit them all within a matter of days, between 1 to 2 weeks. And the whole point of this approach is to get modular large panels which have got new heating and M&E systems embedded within them. It's to take the whole roof off and replace it with modules which include PV panels already in them. And the whole thing happens very quickly. And there's sort of several tenets to Energiesprong, but one is that it comes quickly, minimizes disruption, and also maximizes the appeal, the aesthetics of the build afterwards. And all of that is quite exciting because we're seeing some pilots of those. There's one down my way, down in Exeter. There's another pilot over in Nottingham. And these pilots are actually showing that retrofit can be a sort of an SME, sort of small scale little project. And you know, retrofit shouldn't be undermined. I mean, we need to be doing 2 homes every minute in terms of retrofit in order to meet the zero carbon target by 2030. And I'll tell you what, they're not doing 2 at the moment. But having different models in the market is very important. And I think there's space enough for both of them. What we need to do is just make sure that we don't jump straight to the skilled solution. We always go, what's the market going to look like? Are people going to have a job for 20 years doing this? And I think if you take that approach, then you can build a sustainable, in both terms, healthy supply chain. Because otherwise you do end up with this boom bust. We need 1,000 solid wall insulation installers, and then next week we don't need them because the policy's changed. Yeah. And I just want to make sure we have a nice, robust approach to retrofit.
Yeah, brilliant, thanks for that. What's your perspective from a further education?
Yeah, I completely agree, Phil. I think, you know, skills ecosystem has to respond to demand for long-term jobs. Mm-hmm. And I think, Jane, you might remember the Green Deal a few years back. And I think the skills system got quite excited at that point, but it kind of it was a bit boom and bust, wasn't it, Phil? And a lot of us were kind of left hanging, really. And we're businesses ourselves. You know, Western College is a £70 million turnover business with 1,000 staff. Yeah. Every course has to have a margin, et cetera. And I think it's around. And ultimately, the skills system, like colleges like Western, we train people to get the skills to get jobs. Yeah. In quite a short space of time, actually. And we will almost mobilise. We're starting to mobilise now for this, but we will probably really mobilise when the industry starts to mass mobilise. And it's about doing that in tandem. Because if one moves before the other, it's not really going to work.
That makes sense. Jane, you're working with businesses in recruitment, and what are you seeing from your experience?
The SMEs I work with, the issue particularly is that business case at Dominic. Why do I need to bring these people into my business, and what's the benefit to my organisation of doing that? And even, you know, what the purpose of it? Is this going to be one of these initiatives that I get engaged with, I bring the people in, and then as soon as I do that, whoa, the government's changed its mind and I've got to go off and focus on something else, and I'm stuck with these staff that I didn't particularly want in the first place, but now I've done it and I'm committed. And this happens a lot. And it's when SMEs, they step back and they say, well, actually, I'm going to wait to see what everybody else is doing and just leave it for now, because I'm focusing on delivering what my clients are asking me to do. And that's, you know, I'm there to deliver a service construction, you know, what is it I'm doing? That's what I'm there for. Yeah. The rest of it is just white noise a lot of the time, and they really disconnect there. And it's really, really hard to get them to think about what the future of employment is about and what skills they're going to need in the future and how much are they going to need to pay for them. Right. Because ultimately it's the bottom line. Yeah.
Jane, what's your response to that, actually? If businesses are quite resistant to engaging with the retrofitting, as Jane has just explained, what's your response to that?
I think it's a really good point that Jane's made, or all the points that have been made so far. I think there's a real re-education piece to be done around retrofit because of the Green Deal and some of the legacy, I guess, perceptions around retrofit that's caused, both for FE or education providers, but also from a business point of view. But also in terms of SMEs and the opportunity and whether it is an opportunity. I totally agree with Jane's point there. You know, we're seeing SMEs are in survival mode. They're not thinking ahead. They can't. They're still recovering from the impact over the last 18 months. We know that businesses are struggling to find the individuals and the skills that they need to help them grow. So there's a real focus on the here and the now and not looking further ahead. And that is a key challenge for retrofit, definitely.
And Lauren, are you guys employing retrofit skills? Are you thinking about retrofit skilling in Futurely?
Yeah, so one component of our company is that we showcase environmental technologies in the space. The idea to really kind of talk to the commercial, the commercial lens and influence them in applying retrofit skills to their organisations. So we definitely have that physical showcase of what's out there, and people come in from the streets because it's quite an easily accessible space, and start to really kind of question what it means to retrofit. And obviously there's so many components of retrofitting. And I guess what I was going to maybe say and point to what you previously said. We're so centralised in our approach, and a lot of the governance has huge influences and impacts. So I guess it's creating structures that are really adaptive to whatever legislation is about to be formed. But also to say, well, you need to sometimes take the approach first, and instead of kind of toying with all the kind of government-centric approaches, we've got some members of the network, and one member in particular points to my mind, and they are decentralising their energy suppliers. They're decentralised, their focus is on looking at the impact of the building and supporting them in supplying their energy so that it's off-grid and it's fully localised. And I think those types of, I've seen quite a lot of organisations that are very much taking that localised approach.
That's positive. Okay, so broadly speaking, how can SMEs support green jobs through green skills, and how does this apply within each of your businesses around the table? Jane, we'll start with you.
Wow, big question. I think it's a recognising that this isn't going to go away. We've got a whole generation of people coming into the workforce who are focused on this and this issue. We've had 18 months of people being sat at home and also focusing on it. Issue. Yeah. And businesses need to accept and recognise that it's not going to go away, right. But they also need to plan for it and what they're going to do. Because when people start working with companies now, they don't just say to themselves, you know, is this company delivering the service I want? They say, how is this company delivering the service I want? Are they green? And if you go and work for any local government organisation, you go through a tender process. Part of the question they're going to ask you is this green enough? Yeah. What are your employment practices like, but are you green enough?
Yeah. When you're working with organisations through Western College, are you looking at some of these questions? Are you interviewing businesses with an eye on, well, how green are they? Yeah.
I think our students are. Yeah. I think that our students are really tuned into this agenda. It's a really competitive labour market, and you're absolutely right. I think businesses have to be more competitive, and they are really looking at sustainability. They're also looking at social value as well, which is another thing. As a person who manages a big writing team, social value is coming up quite a lot. I think my view on where businesses are at the moment, and I spend quite a lot of my time talking to our clients, I think that they are really looking at maybe the sustainability piece rather than specifically green skills. I think we moved from looking at how we're using plastics, before that how we were using paper, plastics, and now we're looking at how we consume energy. So a lot of clients, one of our clients is a company called Bath Property Maintenance, and they're looking at electric vehicles, as are a lot of companies as well. And but the next phase is about renewable energy. And I think you're right. I think the UE project with Workforce of the Future is going to be fantastic, because that offers a free consultancy in a way for a small and medium-sized business to understand what their plan is going to be. I think a lot of them are at the start of that journey. But as for our students, absolutely, they are looking at, you know, what businesses are looking at. They're also challenging us, and so they should.
Absolutely.
Because we're looking at that as a huge agenda for our college.
Yeah. Great. Bill.
Yeah, so YTKO's does obviously some sustainability programs, and we also do, but our bread and butter, I suppose, is SME support programs. So we do in the West Country, we do a very large program where we support about, I don't know, 3,000 plus SMEs, and we have done, funnily enough, in South Gloucestershire as well over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. And what I've seen is a real change in the landscape. We worked with partners in a project called Enterprise in West of England, and those partners had something called efficiency and resource efficiency as part of that program. And one of the partners tried to engage a large number of SMEs in delivering energy efficiency, sustainability, even just bringing it more to a social value point to say, look, this is what we're like as a business. This is the values that we have as a business. Amazingly, no one turned up. SMEs really had problems around finance, marketing, business strategy, and that was what was worrying them. Then, when we spoke to these partners, we worked closely with them, and it became clear that actually it needed to be repositioned. It needs to be talking about branding in terms of engagement with your customer. It needs to be branding and sustainability. It needs to be finance and resource efficiency. It needs, and funnily enough, another major element of sustainability is coming down the road is something called resilience, which is where you basically make sure that the changes of the climate are not going to impact your business, and you take a risk register and you look at how you can impact that. We had a business there who was using they were using a painting system which required lots of mercury, and the reality was mercury was only going to get more expensive and become a finite resource. So actually, as the business went, well, why is your profit margin going down? It's because the mercury is expensive. Well, okay, what can we look at as an alternative? Because you're 10 years down the road, you're going to be making losses as a result of this. So again, that sort of approach, that sort of putting it into the world of business survival, kind of almost subversive greening them with the way we went about it. That really caught fire. 700 businesses turned up, and actually that partner was very kind and gave us the materials so that we've embedded it across all of our projects now. So we've got 1,500 new businesses that we'll be creating over the next 2 years in the West Country, and all of those businesses will be talked to in terms of their business plan, business strategy, in terms of environmental, ethical, social purpose. And for me, that when you talk about new people coming out of FE, that's definitely an area where we'll see young people who want to run their own business, who want to work for businesses with those sort of ethical values front and center of their purpose. And actually, businesses are still not getting it. SMEs are still not getting it. You've got, I think, 80% of customers would like to buy from an ethical business, and it's only 40% of SMEs who tell anyone what their values are. I always do the back page of the website test. If you go to their back page of the website, you can find their actual sustainability values. You can find their policies on it. It should be front and center. It should be that homepage that you land on.
It certainly sounds like there's a disconnect there between what businesses think they should be doing and what consumers want. What's your perspective from Future Leap's angle?
Well, we're very much put sustainability at the heart of what we do. So already, we're carbon neutral in our operations. We are zero waste to landfill, it's reconstruction in the building. We have recycled fishnet carpets. We have air source heat pumps. So instantly, our physical hub is demanding a specific skill set. So that demand is always going to generate that supply. So what I would say with a lot of SMEs, it's trying to kind of influence them in saying that they need those skills, and people will deliver eventually. And it's kind of one of those situations where it's chicken and egg. Like I've spoken to a few colleges recently, and they're struggling to move to those programs, those education programs, to fit those green skills because there's not enough demand of them in employment. So like, where are you talking to the right people? And that's, we're a network of organizations that are wanting to become more sustainable. Not all of them are sustainable. Some of them have got, quite controversial aspects to their businesses, but they are wanting to bring on the conversation. And a large part of what we do is to kind of introduce them to the right people, and it's creating those webs of connections where we're all moving to the same goal together. And yes, it's a race to net zero, but actually at the end of the day, if we lose, we all lose.
Yeah, absolutely. Jane, do you want to add anything to that, having heard, all the varying views from the different perspectives, and in thinking about it from a regional viewpoint? Would you like to add anything to that?
Just, a couple of reflections really, because everyone's made some really valid points. I think in terms of the job roles, I think there's a need to ensure all businesses are starting to look at elements of green skills within job roles, and that's something that we're looking to really push through the emerging good employment charter. And interestingly, we've convened a steering group for that. That's an initiative that the mayor's really keen to have launched shortly, looking at how we recognise employers as good employment across the region, and that's kind of adding value to the B Corps and some of those very specific sort of accreditations. Interestingly, the steering group have been very passionate about green skills and sustainability being incorporated into all 7 of the core pillars of that good employment charter, which I think is fantastic. I think it's a real opportunity for businesses to set themselves aside. We're definitely hearing that, picking up on Dave's point about social value, there's been a real focus to date on CSR. In terms of businesses, well, now sustainability and green is definitely coming higher up on the agenda, as well as CSR and actually it's making employers of choice. So thinking about that good employment charter and about how you as a business attract the creme de la creme into your business when there's such a competition, there's not enough people at the moment applying for jobs. How do you ensure you get the best people into your business? Well, there's some clear wins there if you think about sustainability and green skills in its form and incorporate that within your business. So for any business who says, it's not for me, it's not relevant, I would really challenge that. And, it's definitely relevant. It's relevant for every single one of us and all of our organisations. And just really, as Dave said, workforce of the future, I think we've got a real opportunity to support SMEs through that consultancy piece that's now being offered, and those wider delivery partners, because it's a fantastic collaboration. Businesses can access so much expertise through that partnership that, it's a real opportunity that's available currently for businesses. And certainly, just final point really around kind of the next generation, there is a real passion in our young children in school age, and Dave, I'm sure you see it in the FE sector, a real passion around sustainability, low carbon and green, and just thinking about that as a business, probably the best thing you can do now is make sure that you're positioned in terms of offering the right opportunity for those individuals as they come out of education.
Brilliant. And, just taking that further and thinking about how we incorporate all of this into curriculum. I'm looking at you, Dave. What's the role of educational institutions in ensuring a greener future in the workforce, the workplace?
Yeah, I think there's a few strands to this. Well, first of all, I think it's probably worth pointing out the critical mass of people that the 4 further education colleges have in this region. So probably as we sit here now, there's just under 20,000 16 to 19-year-olds studying within our college in Weston-super-Mare and Bristol College Bath and South Gloucestershire and Shroud. So we have a responsibility to create the environment and inspire those students to know about the career options. I don't think they need inspiring about the importance of this agenda because it's their future. But one of the things that we've been doing at Weston is we built a sustainability centre 5 years ago, which is we use that to educate students on that. We look at, we recently had autonomous vehicles in Weston-super-Mare running along the seafront, and we had our software developer students side by side with our motor vehicle students, because ultimately the future motor mechanics will be IT. Really. And we're restructuring our business to make sure that those areas are aligned. And we're looking at how we can create that environment. One of the things we've just done is we just opened, I think the launch was yesterday, we just opened a training campus at GKN's Global Technology Centre in Filton. And our engineering aerospace apprentices will be learning in an industry environment around the future of flight and how aviation. We're working very closely with Bristol Airport on that agenda. And that's incredibly exciting because we do work a lot with the aerospace businesses, so why not train them in Filton? And I think the other, in terms of embedding it into the curriculum, we have employer advisory boards that are aligned with each of our curriculum areas. So construction, for example, Futurely are on our construction advisory board, picking apart the curriculum. And that goes all the way across to business, looking at how we can really incorporate this agenda into the curriculum. And our employer boards have to sign off our curriculum.
Yeah,
so we're really pushing that agenda.
Brilliant. Phil, what are your expectations of what educational institutions should be doing in terms of curriculum?
Well, we've worked with Western for a few years, particularly in their construction. And obviously, they've got a leading modular or MMC, modern methods of construction approach. And I would say that they're maybe not necessarily representative of all educational institutes in construction. Around about, it's about 80% in the West of all qualified FE graduates who move into construction fall out of the sector within 2 years. And that is because they are majorly disappointed about working in construction when they get out of being in a training environment. The good news is that in terms of sustainability, in terms of retrofit skills, in terms of new build green construction, there are opportunities to change that culture. Construction is at a turning point, a tipping point, and those qualified young people who are coming out with all sort of the hopes and dreams of what their career could be can actually realize some of those ambitions. Part of the issue in construction is that actually you learn a trade when in fact what you should be doing is learning about your career. And interestingly, we did a project a few years ago with CITV called Building Growth Southwest, and that program looked at the pathways of individuals who would maybe not think construction was for them, and that can include inclusivity and diversity as well into that mix. And we found quite quickly that actually no one has a clue. You go and be a plasterer, you don't really know what that means. You go and be an electrician, you don't know what that means. You go and be a designer, even you don't really know what that means. You don't know where you'll be at 19 versus where you'll be at 49, 59. And actually what we're trying to do is change that culture, change that impression of the sector so that you get the role, and it's great that there's an employer advisory group. What's also interesting though is how many SMEs are involved in that conversation, because this sector, regardless of any sector you look at, it's all dominated by SMEs. In the West, they make up over 80% of every single business. In UK construction, nearly every business is going to include a sole trader who's worked for themselves at some point. So when we did things like the apprenticeship frameworks, when we did things like sit on the, because I used to work for what's called a sector skills council back in the day, we really looked at actually what happens to these people when they leave the college. Where do they find work? Apprentices, we're seeing them all the time, claimed under social value, put into a role, working with a company who gets to charge them around about, I don't know, £4 an hour plus all the grants they get from government. And then suddenly, as soon as the apprenticeship's over, they're suddenly at £16 an hour. And you're going, okay, well, at that point, the company goes, well, I won't employ you on the books. I won't pay you national insurance. I won't give you a pension. I won't give you sick leave. I won't give you holiday leave. Instead, at that point, I will take that individual and I will subcontract to them. And at that point, that person is effectively a sole trader who is responsible for paying their own tax, their own NI, their own pension. And actually, that's where you get the dark economy of the construction sector, where people are paid in brown envelopes at the end of the week. And for me, the role of education is about seeing these young people who've got the hopes and ambitions of working in not just construction, but all sectors, and saying, okay, where are you in 5 years' time? Who are you talking to in 5 years' time? Who's actually, going to pick you up and offer you a job in 5 years' time? And if you don't want to work for that type of business, if you don't want to work in that sector, how can you take those skills that you've already invested in, you've already trained for, and try again? Because, I mean, speaking of personal experience, but I know that a generation that isn't millennials or even Gen Z. You're going to see people who are working for themselves and moving around. The idea of working for the same employer for 30 years, getting a lovely state pension at the end of it is foolhardy. The reality is young people are coming into the sector today with ambitions to grow and develop themselves, and it must make sure that the industry they're moving into is aligned to the training and the expectations they're receiving in college. And to be honest, our work with Workforce for the Future funded by WECA is all about that. It's about finding the opportunities, the employers, the SMEs who are looking and saying, I can't find the skilled people I need, but actually making sure those SMEs are making the effort to engage with the training landscape. In construction, you've got about 17% of SMEs who've ever talked to an FE college, which means you've got 83%, almost the vast majority of SMEs that never even know Dave's email address. So what we need to do is make sure that they're engaging in that and they're getting the opportunity to pump prime the talent that's going to come out of that. And also the work we're doing in Jane's presentation around that talent pipeline is fantastic. It's about removing the barriers and getting that conversation going.
Brilliant.
Can I just make a
I
comment?
was just going to say, one of the people those students will be talking to in 5 years' time is Jane. Go for it, Jane.
One of the things I would say, partially in defence of the employers, of the SMEs that we have now is, we've got a whole generation of SME managers who grew up in an environment where plastic was the solution. Not the problem, it was the solution. And they're having to change their whole way of thinking about the world. And they're then having to engage with people who speak a different language. Because we've been in this room for 25 minutes and I've heard, I think, nearly 40 acronyms. The guys out there, they're construction people, they don't talk in acronyms. They've managed to do MMC and they're feeling quite proud of themselves. The rest of it is a foreign language. They're scaffolders, they're brickies, they're not interested in the acronym. They want to know what it means to them. So when I sit down with somebody from SME and talk about the people they're bringing into their business, the second I move into the acronym world, they start backing. I don't know what you're talking about. I just want to know what it is. So we've got to change the language, move into a language that they understand and that they can then use to communicate. So I think that's part of the problem, because I mean, I've seen it so many times on skills. Well, people talk to me about the job and say, I just wanted to be able to do this.
It's funny actually, I get calls from a number of construction companies who go, I've gone to a college, spoken to them about it, and I'm still confused about what I'll actually be getting at the end of it. And then they come talk to me and I get my dictionary out and try and remember.
And the next question they ask after that is, what am I actually going to be paying for?
Yeah.
Right.
You told me all of this, I've got all of these acronyms coming around in my head. How many of those are actually skills? How many of those are actually initiatives? How many, and you're trying to help them make that connect between here's the guy I want and here's the person I'm going to get.
Right.
And that's really hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, the skills landscape it is noisy and confusing, and that's some of the great work that Jane's been doing at WECA is to put that in one destination. And we work very hard at Western, and perhaps we are the exception. Thank you for that, Phil. But I think you make a good point regarding careers advice, and I think the education system needs to move to a phase of delivering careers advice based on lived experience, and I think that's critical. And you know, for example, we're delivering the new construction technical T-level course, which is the equivalent of an A-level, and every module in that course, 2-year course, has to have employer delivery. And you know, that's critical really, and fortunately for us, because we're in North Somerset, most of our delivery in this SME heartland, we don't really have any other options, to be honest, because there's not a huge number of large employers. But you're absolutely right, employer interaction being part of the curriculum is just the way forward.
Jane, where does digitalisation fit into green skills then?
I just want to just go back to the previous question from me around kind of the role of education institutions. I heard a startling statistic only a few weeks ago that 75% of jobs that will exist in 20 years currently don't exist. which puts a huge pressure on education to plan for that skills requirement when we don't even know what those jobs are, which comes to Dave's point around kind of, having that employer voice and the, and the input from employers. That's going to be a key challenge for everybody, not just SMEs, but education providers, commissioners, government, everybody at every level. And I think there's a key role that has to happen within the schools about kind of educating about careers and future careers and what they might look like, and tackling perceptions of sectors and particular roles. So for example, during the Skills Summit, we showcased a S&B training academy in Bristol that are one of the UK leads for VR paint spraying and training on the new electric charging. Now, you wouldn't think you would be going into the automotive industry to be using something as exciting as VR equipment to learn how to paint spray, but that's where they've reduced the carbon footprint of the industry, and they're training on those specific skills. How many individuals sat in our 95 schools at the moment and colleges know that that is a real opportunity available to them? And so I think there's a real issue and a real gap at the moment around careers advice, and that's what the Careers Hub are doing, to help hopefully drive forward some of that understanding, because otherwise we are not going to meet the 20-year target in terms of those new job roles, and that's startling. That's quite frightening, really, if you think about it. Something else that we're launching next month, and kind of it isn't an educational piece, but it picks up on the points that Phil's made and Dave made earlier about, and Jane, about kind of skills and moving across from different sectors. We know that COVID has driven people to move out of a sector that they may have been in for 20 plus years into a new sector. We've heard through our Future Bright team that individuals who have been in a particular career for 25 years are suddenly saying, I don't know what to do. I haven't got the skills to do anything else other than X. What we're launching is a talent retention platform that will look at attributes and attitudes rather than just skills alone. So we're complementing the existing system where you look at a flat CV of experience and qualifications with some of those transferable skills that businesses are needing. So we're challenging the status quo in terms of what businesses are looking for. And actually, if you start to search by key requirements such as, I don't know, project management or communication, you suddenly start to find a whole new sort of workforce that you might not have looked for previously, and on the transverse of that is individuals start to find employers and job opportunities that they might not have even considered. So I think there's a real opportunity, whilst COVID's been a really horrendous situation, but actually it is making people think really differently, and I think that's a real opportunity. And and I know Dave and a lot of our education establishments are really thinking about that in its widest form as well. So talent retention platform, I think, will be a really good tool that we have in the area that we can sort of build on in terms of getting people into new jobs, working with education to really start to drive forward some of the awareness around those new jobs and job functions within it, what were those traditional job roles I spoke about previously.
Yeah, and digital fits into that thinking differently, doesn't it? So how do you see that from that perspective, from digitalization of green skills?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, it fits into lots of different roles. We've through the actually it was the Chartered Institute of Heating, Plumbing and Electrics were consulted on the Green Skills report, and they said that there's a real gap at the moment in that industry, because they've got, a whole generation of engineers who are used to fit in one type of system. The learning curve is vast with the new systems and the new technology that's coming. And picking up on Jane's earlier point, the issue is that certainly SMEs haven't got the breathing space or the resource or the capacity to train existing engineers in the new skills that are coming and the new techniques and the new. So it's a real issue. I think there's a real opportunity for the next generation, but we've got a gap right now with existing industry, in terms of how we upskill that industry. In other digital roles, we've got a number of skills boot camps that are coming that have been funded through the Department for Education. The Institute of Technology, which Dave I'm sure can speak about, is providing some fantastic boot camps that are touching on green skills and digitalisation, as is the Institute of Coding as well. So there's a clear focus that's looking at green skills within digitalisation that's being driven nationally as well through some of those funding programmes. And that complements what's coming through, our AEB provision, through Workforce of the Future and those other programmes. So I'm really encouraged that there's a real step change at all levels in terms of that skill provision, and digitalisation, I would say, sits at the heart of all of that.
Fantastic. Before I move to Dave, actually, I'd love to hear Lauren's perspective on that.
Yeah, we're actually hosting a workshop on coding in a couple of weeks' time, just to kind of point again to what you were saying, Jane. And I think digitalisation is something that is such a core component in the way that we're going to move forward. And when you said the statistic, what was the 30% of jobs in the future? We don't actually
75%. Yeah.
75%. Okay, well, beyond 30%. A lot of that is going to be digitalised, and actually it's one of those two things as well. So much work is going to be, we don't know how much employment is going to be available from computers, because a lot of AI is going to be able to take on a lot of the work that we do. So a lot of the physical, practical components of our skill sets are very, very, very valuable, and we might not recognise that now, but that is going to be a huge transition in the way that our workforce is. But to get there, digitalisation without a doubt is going to be inevitably that way of building these systems of an approach to how to understand and interpret and make choices, given that we're using systems of complexity, really. Digitalisation, we're doing the Workforce of the Future for our digital marketing, which has been really, really great and informative, and it's obviously a huge component of any kind of business. But when it comes into the terms of I guess going back to sustainability, there is a huge way that we can obviously apply digitalisation to green skill sets, like Digital Detox. They do a lot about the carbon footprint and managing even your colours in the screens from white screen to black screen. So little things, but it's going to be a huge, rapidly evolving landscape, which we're going to have to adapt a lot of our skill sets to as well.
Brilliant. What would you like to add to that, Dave?
Yeah, I think digitalisation is already changing the way we live and work, and it will continue to. And one of the things that we've been quite concerned about is the existing workforce being left behind. And that's why Jane referenced the Institute of Technology, the West of England Institute of Technology, and that's something that Western College created about 18 months ago. And that is a collaboration of education providers, I mean a proper collaboration of education providers working together to look at how we can get the regional skills or regional workforce upskilled, and that has involved delivering things like boot camp training, which Jane's mentioned, short, sharp training, not necessarily 1 or 2 year courses. Not everyone needs that. Some people need 2 weeks training into a job. And it's just changing that landscape. What it's also doing is we're just about to launch a new project called In-Work Skills Pilot, which basically is offering modular-based training to people in the workplace, partially funded, to allow people to not get left behind. So that's something we're just launching. And at a maybe more of a strategic level, we're working with Business West. The Institute and Business West have been commissioned by the Department of Education to create local skills improvement plans. That's something that Matt's working on. And so we're working quite closely there to look at making sure our skills system responds to this need. And as part of that project, the Institute is going to be upskilling the teaching workforce to understand what these emerging sectors actually are. We don't get funded for that, we get funded to deliver qualifications. But this institute allows us to get the FE workforce ready for that future.
Okay. Any comment on that?
I'm sitting here blown away thinking, yes.
I've got a little something to add to that.
Go for it.
Just to say that in terms of digital skills, we're running a project down in the heart of the Southwest, so that's Devon, and that's looking at the digital enablement for SMEs. Construction, the whole built environment's got the second lowest levels of digital competency after farming in the UK economy. If you employed a marketeer, you would expect them to be able to use some sort of social media and perhaps even build a website, maybe even work a CRM system, client reference management system. But the the point is that it can be about the future. So augmented reality, virtual reality. We've just led a £3 million project with Bristol City Council, which built 500 homes using modern methods of construction. There we used digital design software. We used digital processing software, and all of that was to the benefit of reducing waste, so that you don't throw away 20% of everything you build, which is the construction standard. However, there is an issue around the fact that SMEs in the UK are fantastically unproductive, as per the government's publication in 2019 from the Department of Business, Energy, Industrial Strategy. It called it the long tail of SME unproductivity, which basically they meant, and this led to the digital boot camps, which led to the idea that you need to get them to adopt technology. Slight issue with that is that you either go, hello SME, we think this bit of tech will really improve your business, use it. Or you go, let me train someone to use this new bit of tech in your business. What they're actually not addressing is the barrier from SMEs, which is, why would I? And for me, in construction, I've sat in meetings just over the road, actually here, where people have said, I've got a new piece of software that I use to calculate loads in my crane, so I can lift stuff quicker and I can work out quickly what I can lift and where I can move it, and I can do that all at a touch of a button, where it takes me half a day. Say, oh great, do you use that? I go, no, because I don't trust it. And it's exactly the same situation in all of it. Hinkley Point, the Europe's largest construction project. Obviously, they had the cutting edge of technology at their fingertips. All the local supply chains, again, they wouldn't even pick up the iPads. It's meant to be a paperless site. Everyone was still having the back of the fag packet drawings on their white van bonnets. Now, all of this means that we've got to tackle the barrier, which is trust. It's literally behavior change. You've got to say to SMEs that I know this will take longer. I know this will be inefficient, but it's worth doing, because in a few months' time, you will be getting your Sunday afternoons back. You'll be getting your Saturday mornings back. You won't be doing your invoicing whilst the kids is at home playing and making noise. You won't be trying to quote for new work, when in fact, actually, you should be doing that in your working day. SMEs are always working, doing the doing, not planning strategic. And we've got to just change the behavior to see digital as the way forward, that they can then reduce their environmental impact. They can reduce their, they can improve their productivity. And so that's really the major.
All valid points, Thanks for that. So how can we get leaders thinking about greening their businesses and the various functions within the business?
I'm not on the panel, but I do work for UE Bristol.
Right, so go ahead.
So I work in Careers and Enterprise as a project development manager, and obviously it's been referenced quite a lot that UE are on that green journey. We talked about education and about what students want, and you're absolutely right. They look at the organisations rather than the actual job. During COVID, we've seen a drop in placements in particularly the Faculty of Business Law, around 50% because of the situation. So last year we started launching student consultancy projects, which, thinking about some of the things that have been said around here, which is a free business consultancy for organisations, large or small. And that's around, they typically start in January, they end in May. The student works for the organisation, it's free, so they're not paid. And when I say they work for the organisation, the model is the organisation will come up with a business challenge. Now that business challenge, like has already been mentioned, you know, you're talking about sustainability and green being on the final pages of the website, needs to be brought forward onto the home page. So this year we're engaging with a number of courses, including marketing, including business, including HR. We've got quite a range. We've got 2 undergraduate courses and 5 postgraduate courses. So we're not talking about, all of those students being sort of at the beginning of their journey. Some of them are postgraduates doing masters. So I've had a meeting with Manor and Jamie earlier about setting up regular meetings with South Gloucestershire and how we can promote those projects. Yeah. But I think, the main thing is they last between typically 8 to 12 weeks, depending which program they're on. But, it seems that there's a real opportunity to give students these projects to support SMEs with some of the things that the challenges we've been talking about. Yeah,
they're really good.
Right, yeah, so that's good. So yes, it's not just about the, what we've got funding for is for our Faculty of Business Law, so it's not necessarily about the technical side, and it should be very light touch for the employer because the academic will oversee the project. So the employer will come up with a business challenge. There might be a conversation between academic and employer just to make sure it's, it's tweaked. Yeah. So, it suits, what the student is working towards. But at the end of that, sort of 8 to 12 weeks, 1 day a week, a report recommendation will be given to that employer. Yeah, fantastic. Whether they decide to take that up, they can get some good ideas. But a lot of it is around marketing and awareness. And it's a way of us engaging with businesses and giving students a real life experience as well. Yeah, I guess the issue was last year we had an ask in Careers and Enterprise. Oh, we need 120 projects from employers. Go and find them. We didn't have any processes. This year we have got some funding, so that's the sort of project I'm overseeing around. Sort of streamline some of those processes. Looking at templates, looking at business guides for organisations, set up website pages so they know how they work. Yeah. And at the end of it, getting case studies from employers so we can promote that further, and feedback from employers. But just listening to some of the discussions. It definitely does sound valuable, and it does sound like we could probably have a wider conversation later on, because actually I've heard similar bits of what you're saying in terms of thinking with the businesses that are actually attending this business show. So I'll catch up with you later, and we can try to pull the strands together a little bit. But I think there's something there for sure. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so just going back to the question of how we get leaders thinking about greening their businesses and the functions within the business. So how do we do that? How do we make it practical for leaders? Jane?
I think it's back to that business case thing for why are you going to do, what's the benefit to you as an organisation? What do I take to my board as a business case for doing this? We talked earlier about strategy, and that long-term thinking and that strategy. People shy away from it if they're in an SME. They're like, oh, strategy, I'm not strategic on my business. I'm just running my business. They don't realise that every time they think long-term, they think strategically. So you've got to help them to understand that strategy isn't a dirty word. It isn't just difficult, and help them take that forward and use it as a way of thinking, what am I going to need in the future? I'm sitting here now with my 6 employees working around me. What am I going to need from them? And be able to articulate it, because quite often big companies are saying, I need a job description for this job, and they don't know what words they need to use to articulate it. And then how do I get that out there and make it interesting? And that's part of the problem is, what do I want and how do I say it? And that's the issue that they've got to get over. But it's getting the board convinced. We've still got, I mean, my biggest bugbear, as you know, being a reward specialist, is that there's still 98% of boards are made up predominantly of average white men who are of a certain age, and we've got to get them thinking differently too. And that's a slow process. We can't do it overnight, and we may never not see that change significantly until they all retire and let the next guys come in.
Right. Jane, you make you brought up some examples actually of green roles in your presentation. So how do you see us influencing business leaders to start incorporating or changing some of those and making them more green?
So a key part of that is, and that's one of the reasons why we've brought in UE to do that skills for clean growth piece under Workforce of the Future, and that's specifically working with business leaders. So looking at how they incorporate green elements within job descriptions, how they change business practices, how they change production, how they change their procurement, everything. It's working through the whole, each part of a business's function and looking at how they can green that business. So I feel that's a real opportunity. Sitting alongside that is Business West's provision that's looking at kind of a wider piece around business support, and they themselves have just become a B Corp, so they can really kind of add value to that as well. So I think there's a real opportunity at the moment, whilst those programs are running for the next 3 years, to help influence leaders and then use those people who are going through those programs and shine a spotlight on them and start to really show how that's benefiting their business. We can do that through, for example, the Good Employment Charter, and some of those other initiatives to really showcase some of the great work that businesses are doing. So I think that's a real opportunity. Also, we've got National Composite Centre as part of Workforce of the Future doing, and picking up on the previous point actually around digitalisation, they're doing a whole piece with SMEs around digitalisation of processes and reducing the carbon footprint of their production processes through digitalisation. So again, there's a real opportunity for businesses at the moment to take up that. And again, we could shine the light on that. Also, we've got green business grants and low carbon audits that are being offered. So I think there's such an opportunity at the moment that's there for businesses to take, and it's all being offered fully funded. It's not free. Obviously there's different government funding streams that are paying for it, but it's free to the business. It's fully funded. Yeah. And I think, that there's a real opportunity. I guess the risk in all this is reaching the right businesses and picking up on Jane's point earlier, they're all, heads down running their businesses, probably some of them thinking this isn't for me, it's not relevant. So it's how we get to those businesses and how we bring them through those programs and really challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
And I think we've all got to do that.
Lauren, do you think businesses do see the opportunity? Are they aware of this opportunity?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because obviously I'm having interactions with so many businesses every day that are just starting to have these conversations. And I think what's a great thing about a network is that we've got all eggs in one basket, basically, and a basket to choose from grants and funding to consultancy work. We offer ourselves carbon consultancy, B Corp consultancy. We're going through a B Corp accreditation at the moment, and it's such a rigorous process. So I think for business to even start that, you're going through quite a structured, analytical, tooth-picking tool of your business to make sure that you're really applying those environmental, social, governance values to your whole organisation. So I think that's definitely quite a structural way of applying that. And yeah, I guess what previously I was thinking about, and the leaders thinking about it as well, is that my background in ecological design thinking, it comes from a systems thinking perspective, giving people the holistic narrative of what their one organisation has and influencing the larger picture of systems is just so important. And that's when you can bring in creativity, you bring in innovation, you can bring in the people that aren't just going to say, oh, we've got 1.6 million tonnes of carbon. What is that? What does that look like? How is that? How can you even receive that in the world? So it's kind of giving people the tools and the imagery to really act on
message.
That. Yeah,
so that's understandable. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this brings us to our last question, and I'm going to come to you first, Dave. Are there other opportunities for local businesses to engage with and collaborate with educational institutions or training initiatives on these skills that we haven't heard about yet so far?
I think there's an open door.
Yeah.
Well, there certainly is with Western. I can't speak on behalf of everyone, but I think it's just all around that getting in early engagement is key.
Yeah.
I think a lot of businesses need to start seeing a relationship with a college like Western's, like a supply chain partner, because of the volume of people that are coming through. But also that reskilling element we talked about today. And I'm just looking at one of Jane's slides here where you've got traditional job role and low carbon job role, and the bit in the middle is going to require people like us to help out with that. So there absolutely is that opportunity for engagement. But of course, the education providers need to step up, and they need to make that engagement easy, and they need to make sure that engagement delivers value.
Absolutely. Phil, what do you think?
Other opportunities? I think there are. Obviously, WECA have got a wonderful presentation that Jane's given just recently, which has got a number of programs, and those programs are only going to increase in number. I would say that from our point of view, YTKO is running a project in the west of England as part of the Workforce for the Future. That project's looking for traditional construction SMEs to have the opportunity to understand MMC, because I think with all of this, there's a chance SMEs don't know what's coming. I mean, if you're working 70-hour weeks just trying to get, through your current job pipeline, you haven't always got the opportunity to do sort of panels or think about these things, strategically. And I think for me, SMEs, particularly in the built environment, there's shockingly low numbers who actually have anything to do with modern methods of construction, i.e., modular housing, or even, some of the data-led digitalization of the sector. So going forward, we've got this project over the next 18 months where we're working with SMEs, and we're literally just going to show them and engage with them in MMC, which means we're buying them breakfast, we're taking them to sites, and we're going to, because there's 500 homes in the west of England at the moment that are being built using the most cutting edge technologies. And actually we want to start showing them, because if you walk past them, you wouldn't know. So we're going to do that. And so any SMEs out there, please let me buy you breakfast and get in touch.
Fantastic offer. Thanks, Phil. Jill has a question. Go for it, Jill.
So one of the things you guys have been talking about, because I've been listening doing something else at the same time, is you've been talking about sustainability. So one of my questions to the panel, and to particularly WECA and Western and UWE, is where is the sustainability strategy in the funding? So if you look at Gloucestershire's growth hubs, their funding ends in 2023. If they don't secure additional funding, all that support that is currently there for the Gloucestershire businesses for free will go. And is there a danger, because businesses expect this for free, that if that then has to be filled by commercial businesses like the Business Kitchen, that actually people won't be prepared to pay for it because they've always had it for doing nothing?
Who would like to take that one?
We recommend Jane has.
Yeah, Jane. This is all yours.
No, it's a really good point, actually, Jill, and that's something that within the skills system, ourselves and providers such as Dave, it's something that we have to grapple with all the time. It's something that we constantly feed back to government, because in order to stabilise the system and to offer some certainty so that we can basically focus on all of the things that we've been talking about today, the funding really needs to be more stable and not short term. In some instances it's annual turnover. I think encouragingly, through the new skills bill and through the strategic development fund, there is longer term funding that's coming down the line. And once that bill's passed through Parliament next month, we should see some of that stabilisation around some of the skills boot camps and some of the other work that Dave's been talking about as well. So I think the government is starting to think differently. It's got its net zero strategy. There's an environment bill that's due to be passed in April next year, and also the skills bill, as I say, that will go through Parliament for its final reading in November. And all of that does bring an element of longer term planning, and then hopefully the funding will follow that. But it's a really good point, and it is something that we do make when we meet with with government ministers. It's a point that we do continually make.
Does that answer your question? Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I was just going to say that when I read the further education white paper when it was released in January, I was really pleased to see the idea of multi-year funding being raised finally, because it's so unstable as an education provider, and sometimes funding rules change within a matter of months, and it's very difficult to business plan for the next academic year, let alone beyond that. So I hope that does go through, and we move to a more of a common sense model where education providers have that stability and a bit more autonomy as well.
That's exactly it, Dave. You know, hopefully those multi-year funding agreements.
I guess part of it came from several conversations I've been having over the last couple of years, is that as businesses, I mean, Business Kitchen doesn't get any help with anything very much. You know, if we want to learn something new, we go and invest in the training and pay for it. But we were talking about the fact that because funding can be so variable, actually, isn't it about time that businesses actually got together and created their own funding models that actually are completely independent of political whim, the economy or anything else, and actually is much more of a collaborative effort of businesses. If you took the top 250 businesses in Gloucestershire and said put £1,000 into a pot each month, you can do the math as to how much money that generates, and then and then if somebody needs a new PC because that's getting in the way of their business surviving, that organisation can take a view as to whether that's where they want some of the money to go. Is it a loan? Is it a grant? And I think, to me, there needs to be more of business stepping up to support business than continually relying on funding coming through from public authorities. Anyway, that's my particular soapbox. I shall go away now.
That's definitely something to take away with us. Thanks, Jill. That might be the next forum. Okay, before we finish up, is there any last comments from the panelists? No? Any questions? I think we have time for perhaps one question from everybody else sitting around the table. Are there any questions? No? Happy? Great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It's been a real pleasure. Really enjoyable conversation. Really insightful as well. I think we've all heard about the different sources of information, funding, grants, programs that are going on, the plethora of programs that are going on in the region. So yeah, if you need to find out more, Phil, Construction YTKO. I've got Jane Vivian from WECA up here, who's sitting there with fantastic information for businesses locally. We have Dave from Western College. We have Jane from, I know recruitment, but I don't know the name of the company. Reward Risk Management. And we have Lauren Fields from Future Leap. And I've been Gamu Matarira from Jane Consultancy. Thank you, everyone.